are self-driven independent groups of local organizations and NGO country offices that work together towards the common goal of putting communities front and center in development in their countries. The ultimate goal of the movement, next slide, is to bring community-led development to scale everywhere it's needed, based on equitable partnerships that place communities at the forefront of their own progress. Towards that end, we have 5 goals: voice and agency for all citizens, and especially for women, youth, and marginalized groups, and effective community-based civil society organizations for them to express collective aspirations. Second is adequate community finance with policies that ensure all communities have a fair share of public resources to achieve their local goals. Third is good local governance that's democratically elected and financially autonomous. Fourth is quality public services. And fifth is resilience, preparedness for all communities. We believe that the SDGs can only be achieved by facilitating a fundamental systems change that shifts power and resources to accountable, responsive, effective local institutions. This diagram on the screen outlines MCLD's theory of change process, which begins with 2 types of partnership for collective impact: advocacy and facilitation. We have advocacy partnerships that work to mobilize public policy and policymakers for devolving funding and decision-making to the local level. And then we have facilitation partnerships where we support communities and CBOs to take action towards their own goals. And we believe that with these 2 things together, we can achieve the SDGs. And quickly, MCLD works in 6 ways. Through our national associations and our members, we collectively pursue policy advocacy, support growing national associations, enhance the practice of community-led development, build global solidarity, mutually strengthen all of our capacities, and undertake collaborative research. And so with that quick overview, over to Gunjan to situate us in today's call specifically.
Thank you, Nelly, and welcome everyone. We appreciate your coming together with us at a time like this, when there's so much happening in the world around us, whether it is the killing of innocent women, men, children from Gaza to DRC, to the famines in Sudan, the food insecurity, the conflict that's going on there, again in Gaza, the starvation. We know as we speak that Kenya is burning, the students' movement, which has been going there. The youth movement has been met with a lot of protests. We know in India, the Booker Prize winner Arundhati Roy is now being prosecuted. So we know that at a time like this, when there is so much is happening around the world, in terms of shrinking civic space, in terms of people being denied their rights, basic right to life, dignity, food, it is a difficult time for all of us. And we just want to acknowledge all of you for coming together here at a time like this. We also think that given everything that is happening in the world around us, now more than ever is the time for us to come together. Now more than ever is the time for us to be working together in solidarity with each other. And now more than ever is the time for us to not think about who should or should not be in the system, but what is the role that each of us can play together in transforming the system to create the world that we would like to see. And this is why today's call and topic is super important for all of us. The conversations around locally led development, around decolonizing, have left to this kind of almost a us and them camp, wherein we seem to feel that there isn't a role for a certain group of people or actors in this. Whereas for us in the movement, that's not at all how we see these conversations. For us, the world we are in requires each and every one of us. And each and every one of us have influence, resources, knowledge, connections that are needed to come together in order to transform this world. The challenge has been that so far, our relationships, the way we have worked together, has been dominated by colonialism, structural racism, patriarchy, and all of those other isms, which make for very unequal power relationships, right? And that has created a lot of lack of trust, misalignment, fear between and within us, which in some ways has allowed the system to carry on the way it has carried on. And so what we really want to look at today is that how do we change that? How do we recognize, respect, see, hear, value the knowledge, the influence, the experience, the wealth, the resources that each of us bring into the system? How do we recognize that we need each and every person in this? And do it in a manner which is equitable, respectful, fair, and which builds trust and solidarity for all of us. Because that, frankly, is what the world needs at this time. I come from India, and, I always say this in India, when you need your house painted, right? You go and you find somebody to do the job. And you don't trust them, of course, right? So you go, and even if you know nothing, you'll go online. Instead of asking somebody who's been doing painting jobs all their life, you would go online and do your research to see what is the best paint, brand, and color, what you think. And then you will even go and buy that bucket and give it to them to paint because you don't trust them to not skim off the money or to not get the wrong quality of paint. And it doesn't matter if they tell you this is not the right paint for your wall. You're going to be like, well, I'm telling you what to do. If you can't do it, I'll get somebody else, right? They are just a body that is doing a piece of work that you want. You do not respect their knowledge. You do not respect the experience that they carry. And on the other hand, if there is an architect, right, you want to build your house, you want to get the best architect. And so you go after this person and they're like, oh, we're busy for the next 6 months. And you go like, oh, we'll wait. They're so good. You want to create a certain kind of architecture, and they go like, no, that's not what you should do. And you're like, yeah, they know what they're doing. That's respect. And I think what we want when we talk about partnership is that respect, is understanding and recognizing that we cannot do this by ourselves, that each one of us is needed, and that we therefore need to respect each other and what we bring into this equation, that nobody is doing another a favor in working together, right? And so we hope what we're going to talk about today is a conversation where we talk about what does it look like to have transformed equitable partnerships, whether it's between INGOs and local organizations, between funders and local organizations, funders and INGOs, communities and all of us, right? Because partnerships are happening at every level. And there is a need for this equitable, respectful partnerships at each and every level of the system that we are talking about. So we've already been doing a lot of work on this. In fact, MCLD and Peace Direct have been holding a series of conversations for USAID missions to meet with local organizations and CBOs to frame USAID policies. And one of the key areas that we've been discussing in these calls, some of you have been a part of those calls, especially our CBO members who are on this call. I know they've been part of these calls. We just had the Francophone West Africa call yesterday. They've actually been talking about, well, what would we need for a partnership to be meaningful, respectful, and equitable to us? Because a lot of times it's again been a handful of people and organizations who've been deciding what meaningful partnerships should look like. And we believe that this is an attempt to move beyond that and to have a conversation around what it means for each one of us. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Vahe from Peace Direct and his team and colleagues to take us through some of their findings around this. And then we hope that our local CBO members will chip into this conversation, and then we'll have a broader conversation around this issue. So Vahe, over to you.
Thank you, Gunjan. Thank you for the warm welcome. Hello, everybody. I am Vahe Mirikian. I'm the Managing Director for the U.S. Office of Peace Direct, based here in Washington, D.C. I'm joined with my colleague Raaval Bains, who is our Research Officer based in the United Kingdom. And he is going to go through with one of our peace building experts from Nigeria, Prince Charles Dickson, on our report, as Kunjan mentioned. But briefly, before I hand over the floor to Raaval and Prince Charles, I want to just briefly share an explanation of who Peace Direct is. We are an international peace building organization. However, we are not the traditional INGO. We do not have any country offices anywhere around the world. We only work with local peace building organizations in across 14 different countries. And we try to learn from them. We try to accompany them and leverage their expertise and see how we can support them in this equitable trust-based partnership style. We are not perfect. We are constantly learning and constantly improving our systems and ways of doing. But also with that, we tried to do some policy advocacy efforts in DC, in New York with the UN, in London with UK, and in Brussels with the European Union to better enhance and improve practices globally by INGOs, bilateral donors, and multilateral donors to engage more directly with local organizations because you all have the power and you have the expertise. For us, Peace Direct's belief is that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So that's what we try to emulate within our mission and in our actions as well. With that, I'll pass it over to Raaval, who will introduce himself as well as Prince Charles and then dive into the report. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Vahe. Yes, my name is Raaval Bains. I'm a research officer at Peace Direct, as Vahe said. I've been at Peace Direct for about 3 years, and I largely focus on decolonizing systems. And that's largely because it's come through a passion of mine ever since I was a kid, growing up. And I've been lucky enough to be a part of Peace Direct working on these decolonizing systems and been able to produce 3 reports, and the latest of them is Transforming Partnerships in International Cooperation. And that's the presentation which I'll share with you now. Before I do, I wanted to check, shall I introduce Prince Charles now or after the presentation?
We could do after, feel like the flow.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay. So I'll share my screen for the time being, so you can see the presentation. Bear with me 1 second. I'm hoping you can see this presentation on your screen now.
Yep, we can.
Ah, lovely. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so welcome to the presentation. The report that we published in September 2023 is entitled Transforming Partnerships in International Cooperation. And it is essentially a practical guide for civil society, donors, INGOs, and intermediaries to help develop equitable partnerships, decolonize partnerships, in practice, essentially. So Vahe has already spoken a little bit about who Peace Direct are. So I won't go too much into this detail. But essentially, we work with directly with a number of local organizations, networks on a range of peace building issues that matter to them, with the secondary intention of strengthening the ecosystem of local actors. And beginning in 2021, we decided to host a global conversation about the challenges that local practitioners face across peace building, humanitarian, and development sectors. So to this end, we held 3 online global consultations over 3 different years, where over 700 local practitioners were able to share their insights, their experience, and their expertise. The research highlighted that systemic racism and neocolonialism essentially underpin all 3 of the sectors. The first report Time to Decolonize Aid was published in 2021 and took a more diagnostic approach and highlighted the colonial roots of the sector and identified the ways in which systemic racism appear. The second report took a more focused approach on the peacebuilding sector in itself and built upon the findings of Time to Decolonize Aid, highlighting how systemic racism and neocolonialism can be reproduced through program and research design, as well as through knowledge creation and the sector language. So following the publication of Race, Power and Peacebuilding, the second report, what we found was that despite there being a receptive attitude to the research and a willingness, or rather even a commitment to decolonization, many in the sector were still quite unsure about exactly how to go about it. And plus, the change has been slow. So we decided to develop a series of practical guides to assist in the operationalization of the decolonizing agenda or decolonizing approach by providing guidance to allies, both governments and NGOs, on how to decolonize aspects of their work. And essentially the purpose of this is to prevent a series of accessible approaches that will help organizations, as well as individuals, address the power imbalances that prioritize Western thought, Western approaches, particularly when maintaining and transitioning from partnerships. So based on the research, which included a global consultation, focus group discussions, and a series of interviews, there appears to be 4 sets of building blocks required to cultivate equitable and decolonized partnerships. And so we've used the metaphor of a house to help describe the structure and to present the information in a potentially more accessible or visual way. So at the foundation of the house, and then the foundation of our partnership, is our mindsets, and it's our worldviews. And ultimately, they dictate the way we think, the way we act, and essentially the way we be. Once the foundation of the houses are built, we can then look to add our mortar, in which case, in a partnership, is the way we communicate with each other. It's the language in which we use and how we talk to each other. Once the foundations and the mortar of the house are solid, we can then start building the walls. And in a partnership, these are the 4 values highlighted by participants in the consultation as the key to a partnership. And these values are trust, humility, respect, and mutuality, reciprocity. And then finally, the tiles of the house, the roofing. And these represent the practical expressions of a partnership, such as the roles and responsibilities, check-ins, budgeting, for example. And so the first group of building blocks that need to be dismantled and rebuilt are current mindsets and worldviews, represented by the foundations of the house. So working on these foundational elements is arguably the most challenging task. Changing mindsets about the superiority of the global north, their expertise and their knowledge, and dismantling ideas that the global north is here to save, quote unquote, others is likely to be a painful process. Yet this process of establishing equitable and decolonized partnerships begins with this process. Without doing this deeper work, all other reform efforts which focus on changing practices may fail, much like building a house on poor foundations. So one aspect or one practical solution potentially to help change our mindsets is firstly in the global north is to explore the ways in which structural racism and neocolonial attitudes continue to shape our organization's way of working and conducting. We can do this by conducting an independent review or an audit of our organizational culture through a racial equity lens. We can also work together with our partners or with local practitioners to help facilitate a conversation, to understand the differences and the similarities in our ideologies and the motivations underpinning concepts such as development. Holding the partnership together are the values of trust, humility, respect, and mutuality/reciprocity. In our metaphor of the house, these are represented by the 4 walls, as I mentioned earlier. But without these strong walls, the structure will ultimately collapse. And so is the same with the partnership and the values. All of 4 of these values are interrelated to varying degrees. For example, trust and respect are indivisible. One cannot trust without respect, and one cannot respect without trust. So behaviors and actions that emerge from these 4 values include being kind of mutually accountable, having a clear and respectful communication, co-creating partnerships, having a shared vision and a purpose for the partnership, and respecting each other's contributions. Solutions in which we can do this, as presented on the slide. We can share our visions before we actually enter into a partnership. We can share with all parties what our purpose is, what our goals are, and also encourage our partners or other parties in the relationship, in the partnership, to do the same. And then that way you can kind of develop a reciprocity and a mutuality in the purpose and the motivations for the partnership in itself. The third structural change is around the way in which Global North actors communicate with their Global South partners or local practitioners, and vice versa. And this includes examining the language we use and the language used to define certain aspects of the work. So using the house metaphor again, communication and language are the mortar and the substance that binds the bricks together to ensure stability and to ensure strength. In Time to Decolonize Aid, the first report, participants highlighted the need to retire certain language that diminishes the agency of Global South actors, including terms like beneficiaries or even capacity building. And so moreover, open and frequent communication is something that requires an approach that is sensitive to the different working styles, expectations, and preferences of all involved. And one key element about communication is listening. Listening is often something that's taken for granted or overlooked in the act of a relationship or communication, but it requires one to look at the person that they're speaking to, and to listen to understand as opposed to listen to respond, trying to understand what they're saying from their point of view as opposed to interpreting what they're saying. The final structural change relates to different ways that partnerships are conceived, implemented, and mediated throughout the different practices. And so these practical expressions of a partnership are represented by the tiles or the roofing that make up the house. And these different aspects of a partnership are influenced by our mindsets and our values that are outlined at the beginning. And our mindsets and our worldviews impact the way in which we practice our values in a partnership, which in turn impacts the way we communicate with our partners and the language in which we use. And finally, for all of these, they impact the way in which we act and which we behave in a relationship or in a partnership. For example, we should be co-creating a budget that allows for maximum flexibility for the local practitioner, allowing them to adapt and adjust as necessary. Understanding that the situation that local practitioners often find themselves in is it's continuously changing, it's ever evolving, and so we need to be able to provide some finances or funding, if that is what they want, in a way that allows partners to respond to their needs. And that is the end of this relatively short presentation. Let me try and end sharing my screen. So thank you very much for listening. I'll introduce Prince Charles now, and I'll, if okay with everyone, open the floor for Prince Charles to share some of his insights and his experience as a local practitioner himself. Sound good? Lovely. Okay. Well, so as I mentioned, Dr. Prince Charles Dickson is a peace practitioner and a policy analyst with decades of experience in the media, public policy, psychology, and development practice. He's based in the Plateau State, Nigeria, and he is the team lead, I think, as he mentioned in the chat earlier, for the Nigerian-based Tatanawa Roundtable Initiative, a non-profit, a non-partisan, and non-allied community-centered organization that brings people together and connects people of all ages and backgrounds to bridge the gaps in community needs. So I'll open the floor now to Prince Charles to share his insight and his experience.
Thank you, Raaval. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for that otherwise short presentation. Let me quickly say that the shortness of the Transforming Partnership presentation doesn't mean that the work there is that short. It's been an extensive work, and I think Raaval has done a very good job at making it short, but it's not short by any means. These are very deep conversations. And one of my key takeaways in recent times would be that to decolonize the current practices, a lot of shaking will have to take place if we want to achieve the right balance. I take my thoughts from a rather maybe bottom-top approach, and that's from a local perspective. One, practitioners at very local levels, at community levels, in terms of this conversation, and when you look at the Transforming Partnership report, want a situation whereby the awareness and education around the conversations of decolonization happens both ways. We want to see an awareness and education of both international and local actors about the importance of decolonizing partnerships. The idea to build a collective understanding and commitment to changing old practices. It's important that we also address systematic, structural, perpetual power imbalances in partnership. And I've chosen those words very deliberately because at the heart of the conversation are these issues: systemic structural inequalities that has perpetuated a continuous power imbalances. In the conversation, my question was, if we're shifting power imbalances, where are we shifting it to? Are we acknowledging that the global North has the power, or the global South hasn't used the power it has? Like the analogy of wanting to paint your house. Are you acknowledging that you own the house, and because you have access to getting the paint, all the painter needs to do is paint it irrespective of what he thinks about it? But that's not the point. The point is, how do we, in renewed partnership, for example, facilitate local leadership in terms of advocacy? How do we encourage and support local organizations to lead advocacy efforts on issues affecting their communities? The forever issue of, for example, IEC materials. How do we allow locals to be in charge of their communication, especially given the fact that this is their problem? Sometimes when you say sustainability and ownership, how do locals drive ownership when we haven't addressed issues concerning direct funding? What does direct funding mean, for example, to a local organization? Does it mean bypassing intermediaries that might dilute the impact of the resources and ensure that the funds are used efficiently? Or does it mean just giving locals the money without accountability? How do we also address the fact that locals are well paid for their expertise? These are questions that, if we must transform partnership, we should not shy away from. They are at the heart of these conversations. And beyond the rigmarole of having a conversation around decolonization, are we ready to ask questions regarding, for example, what does it mean when we say equal decision-making power? You know, how do we address power balance and equal decision-making? All right, how do we ensure that local organizations and communities have an equal say in the decision-making processes? Our local organizations, and I'm sure a lot of them on this conversation, want to find out how, when there's a call for proposal, what is their input in that call in the first place? Who determines when there's already a power in the balance as to what the terms for disbursement of funds are? You know, this can be achieved, for example, by establishing a joint governance structure. And the question is, are the INGOs ready for such structures where local voices are heard and respected? And again, before I keep quiet, let me again dwell in shifting power dynamics. When we talk about, for example, transfer of ownership of projects, initiatives to local organizations, my question, and locals would ask often than not, is, I mean, who owns them in the first place? How do we address the transitioning from internationally led to locally led projects, from key issues such as how do we address an initiative on the banner? You know, where do local entities have control over resources and decision making? Where do NGOs at local levels, CBDs, CBOs, where do they derive their power from? You know, and these are issues that must be addressed if decolonization is something we want to achieve, because it requires a fundamental shift in two things for me: mindset and practices. Mindset and practices. And like the report cannot overemphasize, it must be looking at mutuality, it must be looking at respect in terms of the real issues, because if we don't look at those key issues, then it would have been, again, another conversation which has passed through, put it this way, a viral conversation which has come and gone. I'll keep quiet for now.
Great, thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much to the whole Peace Direct team. That was, I'm sure you saw the chat is full of people's enthusiasm about everything that you've shared so far, and we have a few questions. But before we get to opening up the conversation to hear people's reflections and enthusiasm about your presentation, and of course, everyone's own experiences, we wanted to invite our MCLD colleague Doris to share about her experience with partnerships and what's been really important to her in partnerships or difficult. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Doris Fatima Weber. She's the Director of Women's Advocacy and Agricultural Development Organization and a member of MCLD Sierra Leone. Over to you, Doris.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Of course, the introduction has been done, and sharing my views on the partnership about NGOs, INGOs, vis-a-vis the way we work together. Firstly, it will be good for you to know that my organization is a CBO, a community-based, and we are in the rural community. So the ideas or the experience of working with INGOs or NGOs are various. You know the NGO or INGO are partners in development who come in to complement the efforts of government. Most of them come to maybe respond to emergency. Some of them come in country to work based on the government's agenda that is tied up to their own aims and objectives. So for me, the experience I've gained in working with them is that, firstly, it is good to work with the NGO or INGO as partners, especially for a very small organization. Most of them, at some points, they will build the institutional capacity of the organization. And they have their methodology that is used to establish the partnership. So what has been working from my own points of view is that when you work with an NGO or an INGO, firstly, the capacity of your own organization, especially being a community-based organization, is built. Moreover, for us that are working in the interior rural communities, because we all know that the NGOs or INGOs have their set criteria for you to access their funding. So having the privilege to work with them, it will help you to build the capacity of your organization. What do I mean by this? Some of our rural CBOs start as what we refer to as a community club, where you just mobilize maybe a few youths and women. You start a club, which is not a structured one as compared to a bigger organization. So in that case, if you have partnership with any of the NGOs, they will capacitate you to structure your organization. They will help you in so many directions so that you will establish as a functional organization. So collaborating or partnering with them, it helps in various ways, like I have highlighted. Some of them are community, some of them are CSOs, civil society organization, some of the NGOs. So maybe if you have your thematic area that is not in line with them, and for at any given point in time you want to work in partnership with them, maybe you will sit and review or re-strategize. So for me, that one is good. And that has been helping my own organization since the inception of it. Working with them has helped me to connect to other organizations. Because when you work with big organizations, it will serve as a springboard for you to network, to collaborate and partner with bigger organizations, even at national or international level. It depends on the performance. But like I said, this has been a help for me, as my own organization is a community-based organization. So working with NGOs at local and national level has helped me to succeed, to even build partnership with international NGOs and INGOs. So that has been working, and it will also help you to be on the spotlight. Yeah, for instance, now we are members of the MCLD Sierra Leone chapter. But because the MCLD Sierra Leone chapter is a coalition, yeah, we have been linked now to the international MCLD. And here we are all in a platform with various organizations. We've listened to Peace Direct. So these are the linkages when you work with INGOs. So some of the challenges, or what I will say has not been working, like I said earlier on, they have their protocols, they have their set criteria for you to access their funding. You know, maybe if the organization is not well structured, they will work with a bigger organization, maybe to oversee the work that you have been doing. They will pose some criteria that maybe your own organization will not have. For instance, they will ask you for audit reports. They will ask you for your board of governors, you know. So for smaller organizations, it's difficult for most of them to even have money to consult or contract a firm to do audit reports. So these are some of the challenges. Again, what I would say that has not been working, what has not worked for us as an organization, the women's advocacy, the exit strategy for some of the organization, you know, because if your exit strategy is not good enough, it will look at as if you've not done a good work or much has not been done. So again, I'm citing the MCLD Sierra Leone chapter. As the name implies, Movement for Community-Led Development. We are in this movement, and we've been taught that if we want to design a project, the community should take the lead. So, meaning at the entire process, at the survey or the baseline survey for what you want to do, the community is involved. Yeah, at the design of the project, the community is involved. During the implementation process, the community is involved. So you see that by the time the project is phasing out, automatically it becomes community owned. You know, there we see community ownership at play. But if, for instance, an NGO or INGO come into a community or any of the localities, just go straight into implementation without the involvement of community people, without the involvement of other key stakeholders like the local government. Like for us in the rural community, we have people that we refer to as the village heads. We have our councillors, you know, we have our members of parliament who play oversight roles in the communities. If you do not work with the various stakeholders, you just come into the community and do your implementation. At the end of it, maybe it is not in the interests of the community. It will end up to be something we refer to as white elephants, you know. And we've seen some of these white elephants projects around, like markets, like schools. Maybe it was not in the best interest of the community people. But if you want to come and say, well, I have this money, I want to come and do X, Y, Z, without the involvement of the community, so all those challenges will be at play. So those are some of the things that has not been working. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doris. And I think one of the things that you are highlighting after hearing also from Peace Direct and Prince Charles is, you know, that there is so much to gain from these partnerships. There's spotlight and visibility, there's knowledge, there's different capacities that, you know, one side or the other may want to gain from each other. But there's a lot of challenges that exist in those relationships right now about the, you know, requirements that are imposed on local organizations, or the way that larger organizations might be sort of privileged in winning proposals or getting projects and things like that. And so the question, I think that, you know, we all have been asking through all of our work and our collaboration that Peace Direct and their partners are also looking at is, what do we do? What are the steps, the foundational steps, and what comes after, to make sure these are not just relationships, but truly mutual partnerships where the knowledge and time and expertise and work of both sides are respected and shared. And also, as Doris said, that's, you know, that's between INGOs and CBOs, but also local governments and communities and all the different stakeholders. So thank you so much, Doris and Prince Charles and Raaval, for sharing. And now, as we mentioned, we want to hear from all of you. I know there's been, as Sarah mentioned, a lot of conversation in the chat box. There's a number of questions that have come up, including Pascal put one in. And so we hope that you will all raise those in the conversation. I think I also saw a hand from Arthur at some point. Before we open up to discussion, and again, that can be to hear questions that you might have for anyone who's spoken so far, or your own experiences, your own visions, ideas. We're just going to do a poll first. So this will, this will pop up on your screen and you can have a moment to respond, or you can also, if it's easier, you can always respond in the chat box. So the first question is just yes or no. Have you been a part of partnerships that felt equitable and collaborative? And that can be, as we've said, and also I saw Sheku raised in the chat, you know, thinking about these are relationships, partnerships, not just between funders, INGOs and organizations, but also between country offices and communities, and the dynamics across all of these. So the first question is just, have you been part of partnership that felt equitable and collaborative? And the second question is, which have been some of the most important things in making that partnership work? Has it been a fair funding model, space to co-design throughout the project, convenient reporting that wasn't overly burdensome, trust, transparent and clear communication? One thing Doris brought up, visibility and shared ownership of the work, where your organization is getting a platform and getting credit for the work that it's doing. Or maybe an accessible counterpart that you felt like you could reach out to and speak with when you needed to. Or was it something else? So we will just take another moment for you all to respond, and then we will close this and open it up for the conversation. All right. Oh, there's another one coming in. I think we can go ahead and close it. I know some responses are still trickling in. Oh, wow, no, they're still coming quickly. Okay. So I'll wait one more moment, but I'm seeing. Okay, we can go ahead and close it now, Sarah. Thank you. So now you should see on your screen the results of these. So 86% of you that responded said you have been part of partnerships that felt equitable and collaborative. So one thing that we will really want to hear from you is what was important, what enabled making that partnership different from the ones that didn't work. And of that, being part of a co-design process was really important. Trust was really important. Transparent communication was really important. And then fair funding, visibility and shared ownership. These are great responses. So I'm going to stop sharing this. Thank you, everyone. And now we can open it up to you, Sarah. You can put some questions on the screen. And yeah, we'd love to hear reflections on what you heard from Raaval, Prince Charles, Doris, or any of your own experiences. What made those partnerships that worked different, or the ones that didn't work? What prevented them from being more equitable and collaborative? And what do you think it would take to have more of these transformed partnerships across our sector? And you can go ahead and put into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and share out loud. Maybe as a
just to say that also the Francophone participants are welcome to share in French.
Yes, thank you.
We can just.
Pascal, maybe you want to start by sharing the question that you put in the chat. And we can hear from Peace Direct, but also anyone else in the call. And then we'll go to Arthur.
Yeah.
Oops, Pascal, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
You put a question into the chat box. Do you want to share it out loud?
Yes. I haven't seen the question yet, but okay.
Well, we can come back to you in a minute. Why don't we go ahead first over to Maya and then Albert, and then we can come back to you, Pascal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Maya. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks to the Peace Direct team for that really great presentation. I appreciated the house analogy. It really simplified things and put it into perspective. So I think one of the things that I think about a lot is how, we're talking a lot about how things need to change, how things need to shift. Prince Charles mentioned mindset and practice in particular, which I thought was important. One of the things that I think we shy away from because it's not very sexy or does not sound very interesting is standard operating procedures. So a lot of this really boils down to those micro interactions that we have. And so building trust, it's like, the behavior change, it's emotional communication skills, cross-cultural competency, it's kind of being humble. So these sorts of things, it takes practice, but also when it comes to procedures, right? In governance, I think was mentioned as well, tools that are used to really see, okay, what are the decision points in this, project or this process or this design that we're doing, and how can we do it together? So really looking at things in detail, which I think in our haste, we tend to overlook, but I think that's where the most important work happens. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Yeah, absolutely. I think, that the clear and transparent communication, trust, all those things are based on those small everyday interactions. Also, Albert, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Albert. I'm from Uganda. I would like to make a comment on the first speaker and Doris. Of course, the first speaker I got on the call when I was on the road driving, but at least for Doris, I was already in the house. But for partnerships, I think there is a lot to do with building trust. And building trust is a process that involves transparency and accountability. If the two are not working together, then the trust virtue will always remain questionable, and that builds shaky partnerships. And now when we look at what has been happening, like Doris was saying, at grassroots organizations, small CBOs, some of those systems have to be built gradually. And in most cases, they don't have the resources to build the systems in place. So what I would recommend is that when you've decided, when an NGO has decided to establish a partnership, at least let them build, first of all, look at the capacity of the intending partners, and then first build the capacity before they can start building or holding them accountable for some of the actions they have to do. But holding accountable for something that you've not built trust or built capacity for is really on the wrong side of what we are intending to achieve in this whole idea. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Albert. And part of what I hear also in what you're saying is that rather than whoever the partner is, the funder, the INGO, a country office coming in and saying, this is what we will give to you. Instead, it's also about listening and hearing what the other side of the partnership actually needs and would help them grow and deepen their work, and to start there. Sheku, and then Arthur, and then Rubara, and then Barry. Sheku, over to you. You're muted if you want to unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also thank you to the Peace Direct team for giving us this great presentation on partnership. I think some of the things they really focus on was the mindset and the practice in this. But I am also kind of like, having been involved in conversations like this, it's also very important to pay attention to the language that we use in terms of how do we engage from international to CBOs or to local organizations. Like some of the languages people use, I really feel sometimes it's not empowering. It's kind of like taking away power from CBOs or communities. It's really when we talk about building capacity, it's present as if there has been no capacity, which I think our work, or most of the work that is happening, is to enhance capacity rather than build capacity. Because I believe that there is a lot of capacity in the communities or in other organizations, but what we need is to enhance and that can be more productive to strengthen the partnership or the relationship that we are building. But also, another thing that is very crucial is an awareness of the cultural diversity. Are we getting ourselves involved in recognizing those differences in culture, but also respecting those differences and using it as a tool for enhancement rather than a tool for dissatisfaction? So, which is also very important, but also like looking at the power, how are we flexible in terms of the power dynamics, who holds the power, and how are we ready to let go some of the powers that we already hold? Because sometimes power itself in partnership is actually used as a tool to alienate or kind of like push other sectors outside of the constructive engagement. So getting ourselves becoming much more aware and allowing ourselves to leave those the power that we hold a little bit, I think it's actually strengthening relationships. Thank you very much.
Really, really great points, Sheku. And I mentioned earlier, but I liked your point in the chat about the multiple layers we're talking about. It's not just funders or INGOs, it's also country offices and national NGOs and even CBOs to communities. There's power dynamics and all of that. Arthur.
Yes, good afternoon to all. Hello.
Good afternoon, we hear you.
Yes, thank you very much for ushering me in, and I want to join the queue with my colleagues to also acknowledge the insightful presentation from Peace Direct. From what Raaval just said, I learned from that together with Queens, and of course Nelly. Everybody is on the right trajectory. It all depends on how we are going to categorize them as to the layers they belong. We were to start with what we actually mean, the mandate that we have. That for us as ASGD, we advocate for social justice and development. We look at primarily community-led, look at local issues, and also see how we can also enhance leadership at every level, even in the household. How does it look like, and what best can you deliver to also influence change at a particular level? This takes me to the short presentation Gassimo has just done around taking notes of the cultural practices. And it goes down again to the mindset as per what is already existing and what we actually want to enhance those capacities that we are looking forward to utilize when it comes to enhancing those results that can impact transformative change. Of course, we are challenged with the traditional way of working long before this time. That is the relationship between international NGOs and local CBOs, as the case may be. There had been a lot of description of the position that CBO or local NGOs are taking when it comes to owning the process and also the results in terms of impacting and changing those lives or situation that we might want to see. From what Prince have said, it is not an easy task. It's the whole process by itself because it starts to transformation, behavioral transformation. And in as much as we are looking at the positive side of it, I mean, such kind of indicator requires a lot of resources, time, and even when it comes to our commitment, it doesn't necessarily mean money sometimes, but if it is money that we sometimes use to break through or possibly improve or motivate, sometimes the particular, benefactor, then we have to at least come out with and look at what actually involved. The issue, even in terms of communication, if it is done in a form of transparent manner, where the mutual trust and respect is being the bedrock of our approach. And then the issue about even taking notice of the fact that somebody or a group hasn't got the capacity will not even emerge, because whatever you might want to say, that individual or that group has a sense of what do they want, how they want to enhance such change, and what would also take them forward. And for me, in I'm making emphasis around the mindset. Once there is a focus in terms of where I want to go, for example, for sure, all I need something probably that will take me to that particular destination in a fast, or maybe want to say quick. But what we actually need to also look at or review is around when we are designing our programs, our intervention. Let us don't forget to take into consideration three main factors. One, after designing those particular priority needs that might be approved by the very community people when they would have actually involved, don't forget that the exits, that is, I'm referring to the relationship between, for international NGOs, when the way they used to work. Let us put emphasis and invest a lot on the exit strategy of most of these kind of people. You would want to agree with me that some of the things that maybe you would see somebody saying this individual hasn't got capacity boils down from probably their planning, the way they are focused on what they want, and that's all takes a whole lot of process. It takes a whole lot of research. It takes a whole lot of baseline. It takes, like what my colleague has just said, Doris, together with Gassimo. You see them concentrating on the values of those little things that we might want to consider demeaning. Say they don't have capacity, they are not educated, they are not informed. Sometimes we are getting it wrong. If you could transform it in their own language, you already know that this is the direction they are wishing to see. Then try to see how they would improve on them and add value to it. That comes in the issue of funding or resources, when sometimes we have mutual mistrust in it, and then at the end of the day, we begin to look at that, okay, they're not capable. That's sometimes not the case. However, if we continue to invest in spending more time in the exit strategy of any phase out of any project or programs, then you want to begin to assess where the leadership comes in for an individual or a group to take responsibility, which direction, in fact, they would want to go, how best they could also mobilize local resources when we would have started the capital with something coming from the international. Relinquishing, decentralizing that particular, office, as we may say. For example, like for now, what we are doing, we are making sure that we decentralize even our offices at the doorstep of the local community by making sure that one, we have a representative coming from that community to be part of our office, giving him the responsibility to follow up, to address, you see them taking the lead, bringing them forward to ensure that they talk to their people in their language in a bigger platform. For example, radio programs, they hear their voices. You begin to see the commitment they will show.
Yeah.
So for me, we are building on all of these presentations, but at the end of the day, let us don't forget that we need to invest more, time in the exit kind of strategy that we'll
Yeah.
be developing moving forward.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Thank you for that point. Rubara.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nelly. And thanks to the presenters. I really liked the presentation from Peace Direct, and the immediate point that I took from the presentation is the issue of decolonization. And I think that one of the contributors have talked about decolonization of our own organizations, and I wanted also to talk about listening, which Nelly, you took off my brain. The first time I heard the word listening was when I was involved in a project with Oxfam. And that is when we go to these communities, what do we really want to do? What do we come away from? Is it prescriptions from our own organizations, or are we actually going to take the views from these communities? Now, the landscape has changed, and now we are talking about co-creation. And even within that co-creation space, I think I would add the word, proactive before the word listening. How much do we listen proactively and put that as an exercise or as one of the important recipes of our engagement with, I don't know whether the word stakeholder makes sense, the word partnership. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but I think that we really need to come to a point where when we listen, do we really listen? And this actually comes to the situation of trust and communication. I'm one of the people who actually voted, for clear communication. And with clear communication, I think that we have trust because in that communication, when the relationship is between an organization from the affluent country, which has their money, there is a little bit of we want it our way, and we have to do it our way. But if there is clear communication channels and proactive listening between the partners, I believe that this, what has really prevailed in a number of partnerships is misunderstanding of local landscapes. And I think that Peace Direct's presentation brought that out clearly, building foundations. Now, that means that we have to break the foundations that were built before. And that is where the real work is, when now you want to work with partners. And I'm deliberately leaving the word stakeholders out, partners. So I think that keywords from me is proactive listening. And another one is what was put on the survey. And I really like the survey. Thank you so much for coming up with that. Other things have been said, so I will not go over them, just to make sure that other people have an opportunity. But one request, if Peace Direct is at peace, at liberty to share with us the presentation or the report itself, the full findings, so that we can actually delve into the details. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rubara. And I liked what you said also about needing to break old foundations. Peace Direct, I think, will definitely be sharing the slides and the presentation after. Barry, over to you.
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. I just want to say that I think a couple of people, in fact, the first person talked about procedure. Rubaro's just talked about communication. I just want to put out there that several of us on this call, including Pascal de Johosu and Sarah Bulbul, have been working together and are almost finished with a proposal jointly with the Collective Leadership Institute to look at these kinds of very issues of partnerships and decolonization in Benin, in West Africa. And one of our main points and what we are stressing is that in addition to what, well, I'd say complementing what Peace Direct has done in their report, which is excellent. I read the executive summary last night and look forward to reading the rest of it, is that there requires for all of this at some point a mutual commitment to what we call a process architecture. That mindsets are, changing mindsets is not just a first step and it's all done. It's a constant process that has to be carried out throughout the partnership process and requires mutual accountability, and it requires sort of non-linear kinds of processes that allow the kind of flexibility that we've talked about. And there's all that unconscious kind of mindsets that are hard to get at unless you have a commitment to each other that really is a very clear process architecture, as we say it, or building collaboration ecosystems. So I won't say anything more. There's a lot more I could say, but I think it complements very well what Peace Direct is doing. And if anyone's interested in that, to learning more about it, we're happy to share. We're almost at a point where we're probably ready to share what we're doing, and we can talk much more about that. So sort of hard to explain all that in a very short period of time, but that's what I just wanted to throw out there for further discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. And also I just wanted to point out that Vahe has put the link to the full report already in the chat box if anyone wants to capture that now. Béranger.
Can I just say, I'll put my email in the chat box too, if somebody wants to ask about it. Thanks.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No worries. Béranger, go ahead.
Ok, merci. Merci, bonjour à tous. J'ai suivi très attentivement la présentation et tout ce qui s'est dit. Je voudrais intervenir sur le point qui concerne le partenariat. Le partenariat en temps normal, selon moi, est un travail qui se fait entre deux ou plusieurs structures qui s'entendent sur un objectif commun ou qui s'entendent pour réaliser un projet commun. Mais ce que nous constatons sur le terrain, c'est quoi? C'est que nous, les organisations locales, surtout ceux de l'Afrique, les partenaires qui viennent avec des ressources financières et autres, nous ne constatons pas cet accord, ce travail d'ensemble, mais on nous amène à nous accorder à tout ce que les partenaires financiers veulent. Je parle par exemple des documents d'organisation, des documents de fonctionnement des organisations. Localement, nous avons des documents locaux que nous utilisons. Mais parfois, quand nous avons des bailleurs de fonds, on nous amène à rédiger d'autres documents pour nous accorder sur ce que ces bailleurs de fonds, eux, constatent ou bien veulent que ça soit. Mais est-ce que nous devons toujours nous accorder sur les violons de ces bailleurs de fonds, ou bien ces bailleurs de fonds aussi peuvent s'accorder à ce que nous, en tant qu'organisation locale dans les pays d'Afrique, nous avons l'habitude de faire, ou ce que nous avons, nos gouvernements ont l'habitude de nous donner, sur lesquels nous nous accordons. Hier, par exemple, nous avons parlé avec l'USAID comment l'USAID doit travailler avec les organisations locales. Je donne un simple exemple. Pour que nous ayons aujourd'hui le numéro SAB qui va nous donner l'accès à nous inscrire sur la plateforme de l'USAID, les documents que nous devons envoyer sur la plateforme SAB doivent être traduits en anglais. Mais les pays d'Afrique francophone, tous nos documents sont en français. Donc, nous sommes déjà, c'est comme une discrimination, une mise à part de certaines parties, de certaines organisations qui, en temps normal, ont plus de connaissances, je dis bien, ont plus de connaissances que ce que les papiers disent. Les papiers ne veulent pas dire ce que nous connaissons. Nous connaissons plus que ce que les papiers disent. Nous vivons avec les communautés. Nous comprenons beaucoup de choses que les communautés vivent. Mais quand on met à l'avant, on met devant nous, fournissez tel document doit être forcément dans telle langue. Et tout ça là, c'est des barrières qui ne profitent ni aux bailleurs de fonds, ni aux organisations locales que nous sommes. En matière de partenariat, c'est vrai, nous avons les bailleurs de fonds, nous sommes organisations locales. C'est un adage, c'est comme un adage chez nous, en Afrique au Bénin, qui dit, c'est celui qui a la farine de maïs qui est le propriétaire de la pâte. C'est ce qui se passe. Donc, parce que nous n'avons pas les ressources, il faut que nous nous alignions forcément sur les conditions de ces bailleurs de fonds et ce qui n'arrange pas. Ce qui met à l'écart beaucoup d'organisations qui connaissent beaucoup de choses, qui savent beaucoup de choses, mais qui n'arrivent pas à avoir accès à ces financements. Merci.
Thank you so much, Béranger. And then finally, Mancho, thank you for your patience. If you want to come in before we close the call.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity you're giving to me. And I am from Benin. And as my previous speaker has spoken, we observe that, ou bien je vais aller carrément en français ou en anglais, both is available. We observe that when partners come, they used to locate online to check when international NGOs want to implement any project, they look online to check which organization is local and exists. But in reality, what's happened is that those people in work, by example, the CBO and the local organization, they are most of the time out of internet, and they don't have, by example, internet access basically, and it's very difficult to them to access those facilities. So this is one of the first barrier that we have when we have to achieve about partnership. The other thing is that how the information is it displayed? Generally, information is centered in the headquarters, and if you don't have access to this information, you can't apply and you can't bid. And this local organization, how often do they have, or what is the availability for them to access those information at a real time? Most of the time they get the information after they close the closing date. Those are some challenges that we have to think about. And concerning the other question that you talk about, what is most important about partnering, a partnership, I think that it's true that we can talk about vision as peace building has expressed out. But you know, before we talk about shared vision and the shared vision about the different partners, we have to think about what is the reputation, what we want to achieve, and how to get into this. So if you have, by example, local organization that have a very good reputation in the area, in the environment, I think that to achieve successfully a project is basically to achieve with them instead of coming with some other partners that even don't have access to those area or those languages. And what happened is that when you come with partners that are big bodies, and they want to implement it, they have to hire the local people instead. And this is, as somebody mentioned it, I think the doctor mentioned it, this means that is disrespectful because they are just middlemen. They don't know what is the challenge at the front end, and they want to satisfy the international NGO or the NGO itself. So they are middlemen and they don't understand anything. They just want to make their profit at the end of the day. So which makes things to be very reliable. The other thing, where the resources are coming from and where the resources are going. So what is the result at the end of the day? So everything should be clear and we work about those different three concepts. I think that the three are the most important to look at: reputation, resources, and results, to be able to see what is effective in this area of achievement. And those listed, those will be based, those will build the trust, and those will require fair communication and respect, and then we have mutual accountability for the whole partners. So this is what I have to add to all that has been said so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moncho. And Sarah, as I close out the call, could you just put up the happenings across MCLD? This was a really rich conversation. Obviously, there was a lot to say. We didn't even get to the second half of our discussion, where we were going to talk about if you were to set out the framework for a partnership, which some organizations are doing more and more through partnership charters, where both sides of the partnership, not just the funder or the INGO, but both sides come and say, this is what I need to have a collaborative, mutually strengthening partnership. What are the things that we would include in that? And so maybe on another call, we can collectively build a partnership charter that matters to us. But I wanted to really, again, thank all of you who spoke. Thank Doris, thank Prince Charles, thank Peace Direct, Vahe, and Raaval so much for speaking. I also really want to thank Paul, who translated this whole call for an hour and a half, which is a remarkable thing to do, and he does it all the time with us. So thank you so much. I know some people will have to leave in the next few minutes, but we mentioned at the beginning and throughout the call, a few people mentioned different things happening across MCLD. There is a lot happening. Many of you are part of some of these different things, but we wanted to share with you so that people are aware. Really quickly, first, Powered by the People project, MCLD is working with activists and social movements across the world to develop a repository of inspiration and learning and documentation. We also, Gunjan mentioned at the beginning, as part of our advocacy work, one of the two approaches that MCLD uses, that MCLD members and partners, local organizations and local leaders are providing policy inputs to USAID and their locally led development agenda. Béranger noted that there was a consultation on Francophone with Francophone Africa yesterday. This is something we're also doing with Peace Direct, and there are consultations happening virtually and in person throughout the summer. We have our ongoing learning platforms and series, the global calls like this, which is the fourth Wednesday of every month, the Unlearning Labs, which are currently focused on community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning, the monthly leadership development calls, where we brainstorm and collaborate and dig deeper into some of these topics. The last leadership call was an opportunity to deepen what we learned on the April monthly call around taking a healing approach to our work and to systems change. We have our working groups, one U.S. government and Hill advocacy, which is working on informing advocacy campaigns around funding requirements and supporting a localization bill so that USAID's localization policy is embedded and isn't changed with a new administration. There's a working group on community-led monitoring, evaluation, and learning, which is beginning to try to, like happened in 2019 with the participatory assessment tool to try to come up with a shared definition of community-led monitoring evaluation and eventually a guide that could be used for people that are interested in that. There's the Youth Task Force, which shared on one of the most recent leadership calls, and there was lots of ideas on how to engage and integrate them more across the movement. We're also launching the Global Communications and Advocacy Working Group soon. Then we have later this summer, there'll be a training on the participatory assessment tool in West Africa. There's many things happening at the country and regional level, lots of collaborations, including partnerships with local governments, universities, INGOs, CBOs. And really importantly, the Global Assembly is happening virtually on July 24th. This Global Assembly will be our global governance body for all of MCLD with representatives from every national association. There's been a call for nominations for those representatives. And on the next global call in July, we will do a readout from the Global Assembly. And in the meantime, there's strategic planning that's starting with the National Association leads, and we will also, after the Global Assembly, do more broadly with all members. And I think what we've talked about on this call is also a way to inform that work. We'll put up a last slide, which just has a few dates of upcoming events for those that are interested. And with that, thank you all so much again for joining, for sharing your experiences, your ideas, really rich insights. And thank you to Peace Direct and Prince Charles for sharing. And as we always do, I think we can close the slides and everyone can come off mute and say goodbye in whatever is your preferred language. So thank you all.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Bye.
So, Pascal.
Right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye from Uganda.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye from Nigeria.
Yeah, bye-bye from Benin, West Africa. Jean-Marie.
Au revoir, au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all, and see you next time.
Thank you, Mantra. See you next time.
Okay, thank you too, and bye.